Hello and welcome to the Fall Line with KS and Company. I'm Dave Capron. I'm in PSA Eastern Division Examiner, and I'm also the training manager at Attitash Mountain Resort. And I'm here today with Angelo Ross.
Hello, everybody. Angelo Ross, Seven Springs, Hidden Valley, Laurel Mountain Training Director in sunny southwestern Pennsylvania, member of the Eastern Division Education staff also. Good to see everybody
And
virtually.
our, and our first podcast with Angelo and I are here. We're just going to talk a little bit about what's going on, how we're getting ready for the season. Angelo, what are you doing to get ready?
Right now, recovering for from bad skateboarding decisions. Yeah. Right now I'm walking this kind of fine line between rehabbing some back injuries, but also trying to, increase agility, increase strength and stamina. And it's kind of a tightrope endeavor. So it's, like 50-50, being careful, but also trying to push a little bit. How about you?
Yeah, same thing. I'm not as much rehab, but definitely getting prepped physically, trying to get back on the flexibility thing, try to get on the roller. I get really lackadaisical spring and summer with stuff going on. So I got to get on that roller, and I've been on the bike not as much as last year through the spring and summer, which was disappointing, but definitely got back on it late August and been flying on it September, October, at least flying for me. Been on the mountain bike a lot more than I have in the past, trying to mix up my road riding and mountain biking. We've done some cool stuff here on the property. My wife and I and my family had a cross country center when I was younger. Hasn't run for years, but we've had the trails out there, but a lot of them are overgrown, hard things, and we've gone back out and reclaimed all that through the summer and fall here, and we've got probably almost 6 miles of riding out there that we're
That's
playing with now. So a little more than you have in your backyard with your little track you got there.
Yeah, one of my COVID projects was building a little mountain bike track in the backyard. Um, it 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 probably sits on quarter acre at the most, but it's 4 or 5 interlocking figure eight patterns cut into this super high grass. Um, I mean, I can go back there and ride for a good 30, 45 minutes without the boredom meter going off, and when you have that limited space, like for me, I there's no elevation change to speak of, so that is more of a focus on agility, and maybe a little bit of strength building rather than building up my wind. But it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, some of the bike trail building definitely works into my strength training and that getting the chainsaw back out, pulling logs, splitting wood. Yeah, my strength training per se of like lifting weights and that doesn't go into the gym.
Yeah,
I'm not much
yeah.
of a gym rat.
I'm the worst at the gym.
Yeah, no, it's got to be fun, man. Life's too for me is as you know, I'm real busy with the businesses, summer type stuff, so we can ski all winter. That it's I don't have that time. If I get an hour, I want it to be fun. Like not that the gym isn't fun, but for me, it's more fun to get on my bike.
Yeah,
Or and then we've been really reclaiming. I have to do stuff around the farm and stuff here anyways that gets those kind of somewhat those agility strength type stuff going.
yeah.
Um,
I don't have the
but
consistency to own a gym membership. It would be a complete waste of money. But uh, I do have a generous and thoughtful wife, so the backyard is basically a playground. There's a skateboard ramp out there. There's a climbing wall out there. There's the mountain bike loops back there. Um, but I get on the road bike, and I did have a pretty bike heavy summer there for a couple of months, which is one of the things that led up to my current problem with my back. But um, I got bike tours for a company in southwestern Pennsylvania called Wilderness Voyagers. We do tours all over the country, and I was on a couple multi-day trips this summer. In normal season, I'll do 12 or 13, 14 tours. This summer was 4. Um, and I think one of the things that happened for me with how much time we had at home, as you well know, you and I and a handful of others spent a lot of time doing Zoom calls and establishing some online presence for the Eastern Division throughout the summer. I spent a lot of time in a chair. And
Yeah.
then by the time I went back to work for the outfitters, I'm doing these multi-day trips that involve some pretty heavy duty drive time also. And I guess it was beginning of August. I had just gotten home from a 6-day trip in Michigan, 9-hour drive home, and I was doing some yard work the next day, and tried to pick up something. We were moving some rocks, doing some landscaping, and picked one up, and it sort of blew my back up. It was probably the straw that broke the camel's back. But um, yeah, before that, the biking was more endurance and wind and things like that on those trips. But yeah, it's there's a lot of overlap between biking and skiing. So like
Yeah.
when you're on your bike, when you're if you have that that training mindset happening, what are you doing on the bike specifically that you think translates into your skiing?
On the road bike, it's the endurance, the cardio mostly. I try to mix up all my rides have climbs. I do like going uphill, um, which a lot of my friends are like, they're like, it's fun going downhill too. But the uphill is that anaerobic part I try to put in there to get the high heart rate, get the heart rate up high and then bring it back down after the climb so that I'm not just always on that moderate. I need to get into that anaerobic zone. And I don't know if I really planned it that way. It's just as I've looked into and seen stuff, and it even confirms through listening to Sue Kramer and looking at her book and chatting with her, Be Fit to Ski book. You got to get into that anaerobic zone at times to prep for our ski season. And the road bike, I do that a lot with the climbs within my ride. On the mountain bike, it's more the agility, getting off track. I mean, I started mountain biking, and then everything around me got paved. So it's really neat to have the trails that we've reclaimed. There's actually some single track stuff within the area that there's an association putting some stuff together. So I've gotten a lot more on the mountain bike versus getting on it here and there. And that is more my agility, my ability to go through rough terrain, have stuff knock the bike around and have to balance on top of it,
Mm-hmm.
change where I'm sitting on the bike fore or aft as I'm going down through hitting stuff. So yeah, I definitely use the two different. That's Jess Stith down there from Southern PA, who's big into biking. Man, he owns a bike shop, so he's definitely a biker compared to me. Has pushed me to get back on the mountain bike to work on that strength, agility type thing versus just being on the road bike so much.
I feel like
What it?
any motion sports,
Yeah,
and that's one thing. I don't know. A lot of this just might be me justifying not joining a gym, but like I feel like there's a lot to learn from any motion sport. So road biking, mountain biking, obviously, trail running, road running, skateboarding. And that's where I like to spend my energy because my schedule is really sporadic. My biggest problem is probably consistency. And so you know when you have multiple activities, whatever kind of mood you're in for the day, when you find yourself with a free hour, you can go do that thing, whether take a run, take a bike ride, or get on the ramp
yeah.
for a little while, and get your have fun doing those, but also get your brain in a place where you're thinking about the movements you make on the snow, and then getting that benefit out of that as well.
I I I, I think that I was watching Josh Hoggins stuff on the fitness program, and it was kind of neat. He did some simple stuff of just going almost on a hike or running along the rocks and that. He had that one view where it was on the ocean over there in Maine, and I I think sometimes just a hike, anything that gets us to move in space, more than just our natural walking at some unstable or not even unstable, but just uneven terrain
Hmm.
gets us to start thinking about that. So it's kind of interesting as I've just been the last week or so since Josh's video was on that thing, thinking of those places like where does that happen just when I'm doing my normal stuff around the farm that I might be playing around with that and not even know that I'm working on some movements that will probably be applicable to skiing.
Hmm.
Was pretty neat. I mean, and you're skateboarding. I mean, if your back wasn't kind of, you're not rehabbing right now. If you weren't rehabbing right now, how much would you be on the skateboard?
Well, how much would I be on it? Honestly, probably 3 to 4 days a week.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I just turned 49, and when I was 19, 3 or 4 days a week was low.
Yeah.
It was 6, 7 days a week. It was because it's a lifestyle. There's a culture there, you know, that we, fully were a part of, or at least thought we were a part of in the 80s as kids. But now, 30 years later, a couple days a week, a couple falls, landing on wood is much better than landing on concrete, but you know, definitely get squeaky and make noises when I'm getting out of bed in the morning these days.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot you can learn about skiing from skateboarding, and not
Yeah.
only physically, but just your vibe, your mentality about the sport.
Yeah.
My personal belief is that, and I think this is true, that the ski world is very race dominant. It's very race influenced. From the design of the gear just right down to the technique. Um, but I don't think that's why most people ski, and it's not why I became a skier growing up. I was more informed by 80s skateboarding, which if anybody in the audience is familiar with that, it was a very different vibe than it is now. There were no X Games. Competition was more of a joke than actual competition.
Yeah.
There's a real art piece to skateboarding, and so that's what I knew. And so as I developed into more of a skier, that was kind of where I was coming from. So when I get out on the ramp and I'm thinking about, how can I think about these movements and how they're going to benefit me on the skis, that's only part of it, because the other piece of it is the vibe. Like, I'm not interested in how fast I go, and on the skis so much. I'm more interested in how does it feel? I want it to look good, obviously, but I like to find weird terrain that, ups it taps into that creative piece that we all have, and that's what drives me as a skier. And I think maybe that's why maybe that's why I gravitate to the skateboarding as much as I do to inform my skiing.
Yeah. Yeah. It looks like you get a lot from your skateboarding. When I was watching some of your video the other day, you sent me a video of you skateboarding on your ramp in the backyard, and there's a lot going on down in your feet and ankles
Mm-hmm.
and lower body that you were playing around with. I mean, definitely down, at your ankle, even your feet, your foot, the
Mm-hmm.
way you were manipulating, you were playing around with the board there and doing a couple flips and I can't remember what you call it, a couple. There was like a truck in the front of the truck and back of the truck.
Yeah, that's what
I'm
holds
a
the
pretty
the wheels to the
weak
deck.
skateboard guy, but yeah, it was neat to see that because it's like I was watching you. You would describe one where you were showing the foot on the board and how you were using the little toe, pinky toe side
Mm-hmm.
of that was kind of neat. And
Mm-hmm.
I think places I can get some of that stuff is that uneven type stuff, walking around stuff that Josh was talking about, that you just go on a bunch of rocks by the ocean and walk around, or I get on the Bosu ball,
Mm-hmm.
and mess around with what's
Yep.
going on and get on one foot, and can I get on the top of that half ball, or even just on the floor and balance on one foot and manipulating the foot, or seeing if I can stay there without moving around. But that was
Mm-hmm.
pretty neat to watch how you
Well,
were messing with
and
just your feet.
talking about just standing on the floor and doing that, really, to me, that makes me think that, and I use the word training, I don't, but I don't love the connotations of it, because it sounds very, um, it can come across, I think, as very methodical and sterile and objective, but I use the word, I think, because we all use it. But the point I'm trying to make is that when you just stand on your floor, maybe in your bare feet, probably in your bare feet, and try to balance on one foot, everywhere is a training facility. In the world of martial arts, they say everywhere is the dojo. You just don't learn these lessons in this particular room for this hour and a half on Tuesdays and Thursdays. When you go out into the world, this is where you apply it. This is where you apply self-control and respect and with itness and those sorts of things. And in that vein, everywhere you go, everything you do can be training for the ski season. So if you're
Yeah.
standing in your living room in your bare feet on one foot and you feel you start to lose your balance, it happens.
Yeah.
Like maybe I don't know, you have a head cold, one of your ears is plugged up, the planet's spinning, whatever throws you off balance, you start to feel different parts of your foot. And it's
Yeah.
a great reminder that, oh man, you know what, there is a bone behind the pinky toe. There,
Yeah.
check out that bone in the ball of my foot. And even though in a ski boot those things are held captive to a high degree, I mean, in a well fitted ski boot from a great boot fitter, you can articulate your foot
Yeah.
muscles. There's a lot of freedom in a well fitting ski boot. But even in a ski boot that fits you great, your foot is held captive. And it's the
Yes.
more you practice those movements without that ski boot on, and the more you practice it throughout the year in different settings, the more of a reminder it is when you do have your ski boots on. It's like, oh yeah, you know what? I can articulate my foot muscles and affect the edge of this ski.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I get more into that. I mean, just walking up the stairs and I do a lot of that to prep where I don't think of it during the summer, that I will think of just body parts moving and how I'm going up the stairs and flexing the leg. And I get funny looks from the wife because she's like, "You're thinking skiing. What are you thinking? What are you doing right now?" And that's some of the stuff I need to in my natural life, just kind of play around. And we get to do a lot of stuff on the land and the property here because of the business and the farm. That there's a lot of stuff I'm doing that I start to think about it now. And as you said with the task force, it's been interesting because I have not really mindset wise left skiing during the spring and summer this year like I have in the past. I was on the phone with you and the rest of the task force while I'm picking blueberries, and I had the headphones on down in the middle of the orchard. So it's like that's usually doesn't happen middle of the summer. We're talking about what can we do for webinars. So yeah. So what are you doing other than physical type stuff to get ready?
Well, I mean, and as you know, the national PSIA AASI board just approved the people skills and teaching skills, the fundamentals. So that's going to become more a part of what we do job wise, which I think is something that we and the membership need to look at. But I really love what that actually means. What those things mean, and I tell people often in my clinics, the problem with writing something down is that you've written it down. The problem with putting it in a manual is that now it's in a
Yeah.
manual. But if you
Yeah.
think about what those mean, and you're actually expected to um, consider people's goals and what their intentions are for that day on the hill, for what that lesson is to them, that's a real shift in not just ski teaching, but it's overall, like systemically, it's a shift in American education, probably education everywhere, where the prior belief was more teacher centered and not student centered, and obviously that didn't work, or we wouldn't have changed it. But what I'm getting at is, like, with those things being put in the spotlight, it's made me start to reflect on them earlier in the year. And I
Yeah.
know myself, and I'm an introvert. I have a tendency in a group to try to be in the back, and I'll listen for a long time until I talk.
Yeah.
That's not a great strategy when you're the course conductor.
Right.
So as I start to reflect on the people skills and that piece of what we do, it's making me now, earlier in the summer, start to consider, like, how do I actually come across to the people in my groups.
Right.
And if it's an update clinic, that's one vibe. If it's an exam, that's a different vibe. But you regardless, you still want to come across as um, like you're listening. I mean, you don't want to
Right.
come across that way. You actually want to listen. You want to
Yeah.
listen. You want to really try to meet people where they are and get them to where they want to be. So I've I've been thinking about that quite a bit. And I mean, you can read about those things, but I think the best thing to do is quite a bit of introspection first. And when you have interactions with people, really actually reflect on how they went, and try to improve that stuff, What do you think
Yeah,
about that?
I think the people skills is huge. I mean, it's something we've kind of had in the back of our mind and some of our stuff with communication and that, but it's never been out the way it is now with our new standards coming out. And I've been thinking about it a lot, just in terms of, have I been doing them well? How can I improve on them? How can we build that trust? I mean, it's definitely something I've been thinking about too, especially as our training ramps up this fall that we've been going through already. I mean, our training for PSA has already started for all the ed staffs across the country together. So it's definitely the push. And yeah, for two introverts, it is different that we have to be out there in the lead. And everybody's like, yeah, the two introverts start a podcast. Like,
Yeah.
that's a good one. Who's going to talk?
Just sit here and look at each other with
That's
blank
right.
expressions. And that's funny though, because that you bring that up too, because I was a school teacher for 20 years, and the American society and the education system are, I would argue, they are skewed toward extroverts, but the
Yes.
fact of the matter
Yeah.
is probably half the people are more introverted than extroverted, and very, very, very few people are so pure one way or the other that they,
Right.
like an actual 100% pure extrovert probably doesn't exist. Same thing with an introvert. But, for a lot of years I would teach all day, and it would drain the energy out of me. That doesn't mean I
Yeah.
didn't love it. It didn't mean I didn't like the job or like the kids or like my colleagues or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, when my butt hit the driver's seat and it was time to go home, I was turning the radio off, and I would need that downtime. And the same thing is true, um, working events for PSIA. It's a tiring endeavor,
Yeah.
And when you have a chance to reflect on the people skills and you ask yourself, like, how do I participate in this group? What am I bringing to it? If you know that things like that are hard for you, where an extrovert may derive energy from being in a group, an introvert loses energy from being in a group. At the end of the day, you need to go replace that. You need to,
Right.
or you can't replace it. Energy lost is lost, right, to outer
Right.
space. But you can let it build back up for the next day.
Recharge.
If you know
Got
that
to
about
recharge.
yourself, for sure, and you owe it to the people you're with to go do that.
Yeah.
But you also have to consider, as a course conductor, that half of those people in your group are probably introverts, and
Yeah.
one of the things we have to do is put them on the spot, particularly if it's an exam. And
Yeah.
I think, the fact that these people skills exist and allow us to be mindful of that is nothing but a good thing.
Yeah. It's important. I mean, it's a tricky thing there you see someone being quiet, and to find the way to bring them in without putting them too hard on the spot, but you've got to give them that opportunity. You want them to speak up, and some people just they're fine doing it and they keep doing it, and it's that mix. And so especially at the exams for us, it's a challenge. I think it's a challenge in the clinics too, because they need, sometimes those introverts will be left there and the extroverts get a lot of the attention because they keep asking questions, where you need to find ways to involve them of whether an activity or asking them some things they may do for this thing, to involve them more versus putting them on the spot of what's the answer. What are some things that all of us could do, or maybe have everybody give one thing. Yeah, it's a balance, and those folks, you can't expect them. I don't feel you can expect them to be involved every second, because they don't have that energy level to be that involvement. Their involvement is going to be really boom, good segments. It's not going to be the whole time, especially in that group where they're not comfortable. It takes a while. I mean, we only have a day. I mean, for you and I, we go to hang out with our crew, and it's, that we're comfortable with. It's a little different than a new group every day.
I noticed a funny phenomenon too about students generally, as I taught for all the years I did. I mean, I still continue to teach, just not in a classroom setting. But I found myself from time to time with elementary age students, and they're like drunken sailors, man. They'll say anything that pops into their mind, and they're completely unfazed by the stuff that they say. They don't reflect on it. They don't even think about it. They're like over it
Yeah.
before it even happens. And then high school, you see that start to fade because, you know, learners at that age are maybe a little bit more conscientious about being wrong in front of a group of people. They don't want to say the wrong thing. I taught undergraduate classes. They were even quieter than high school classes. And I taught graduate classes, and they were quieter than undergrad. There is nothing more torturous than trying to elicit a response from a room full of
Yeah.
graduate students when they think they might not have the right answer.
Right.
It's like pulling teeth. And that's probably true on the ski hill too. And it's not faulting it. Nobody who wants to be wrong, in
Right.
front of a group. So you have to find a way to like tactfully let them get that information to you,
Yeah.
the way they want to do it.
Yeah. So it's definitely prep. I think we're all going to be prepping hard. I mean, it's a big part of our system now to make sure we're not just aware of them, that we're actually good at them. And I don't think not that I don't think, I know we're never going to stop working on that, because it's not something you just get good at, and then you have it. You have to continue to work at it, because everybody you meet's different. Like you said, not everybody's a full introvert, full extrovert. There's that mixture, and finding the balance and finding out how you can involve everybody. But to try to involve everybody the same way or at the same level, that doesn't. It's kind of like going over to a kids group. You go in there and you get some kids that are, you go in there with huge energy, and there's not a lot of huge energy there. Sometimes that turns the kids off. They get scared.
Mm-hmm.
You got to go in with a lot of mimicking type energy, and as you build it up. So it's definitely. So yeah, we've been thinking about that.
What about teaching? Like the old joke, right? Like, how do you know what a ski instructor is working on in his skiing? It's what he teaches in his lessons,
That's
you know.
right.
But
Yeah,
that's pretty lousy. That's a
it
pretty
is.
lousy strategy as a well-rounded teacher. How do you
Yeah.
practice becoming a better teacher?
Some of that comes from sharing with my peers. And I watch what they're doing on the hill. You watch the activities of other people skiing with their groups, and then I ask a lot of questions like, so what were you trying to do there? I get a lot of conversations going with Troy Walsh and Peter Howard, that I just keep picking brain, or whether it's Matt Boyd or Murmur Blakesley. I think the biggest way to learn how to teach better is to see what some other folks are doing and what was successful, but then picking and choosing what works for you. And I experiment. I do. I mean, that's part of the whole chaos thing, that I will take a risk and go out and play with something with a group for a couple runs. And sometimes it doesn't work, or the group doesn't, what the presentation doesn't work, or the way I set up the learning environment, the terrain wasn't right. You got to know to switch gears. So, I mean, one way is I do experiment. I do, try to reach out, just not to get the answer, but to kind of get some ideas. I mean, sometimes you don't get the answer from, like, if you and I talk, you say, well, I did this the other day and this really worked. It's more about the idea of, might be pieces of what you did. I might say, I'm going to try that little piece there. And I think the biggest way I get better is being open to try new ways. If I go out and do the same clinic the same way every day, I know I don't grow, but I also know I get really bored. and it is, we can get trapped into that. What's the thing we're really working on for us? And so for one way I try to get out of it is just don't try to pick one fundamental I'm working on. That might, make sure I work on all five.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I mean,
I
we can. I mean,
I think one of the most dangerous things for a teacher is, well, two dangerous things. First is preconceived notions, right? And the other is ego.
yeah,
You know, um, you have to have a level of depth to not prepare. You know,
yeah,
when you see in anything, when you see a less skilled person who is unprepared, you can spot it from a mile away. But I think, in certain endeavors where you are actually very good at something, preparation can almost shoot you in the foot, because if you you dedicate to going down this pre-chosen path to the point where you it's not working and you don't recognize it or you won't turn away from it, nobody benefits from that.
Correct.
And the spontaneity that comes from not having and I'm not saying you don't have any plan at all. If you're going to run an event called Trees and Steeps, then yeah, you have to be aware of what the title is, because that's what people paid for, that's what they wanted to learn, But if you run it down, in my opinion, this is all just my opinion, if you plan your Trees and Steeps event to the point where, you have Roman numerals 1 through 9, and every Roman numeral's got 17 bullet points, and you're dedicated to covering each of these before lunch, and you're going to spend 3.5 minutes on this one and 8 minutes on this one, it doesn't work like that. Sometimes you have to be happy as a teacher throwing caution to the wind a little bit, and if you're a student of the sport yourself, you can usually, whatever direction it needs to go in, you can usually take it there. That being said, again, that requires a level of depth. You can't do that recklessly, otherwise it's meaningless. But if you're conscientious about understanding something yourself, you can back off of the teaching technique, and then it doesn't look canned and over prepared and fake.
I'd say my preparation is the tech, the technical type pieces. Like you said, we know we're going Trees and Steeps, and my teaching is so much for me, and because it's our podcast, of course it's our opinion. That's why it's good you give your opinion.
That's right.
Is my teaching developed? That's right. Is that I really feel like a lot of my teaching is developed on the hill, or it's developed when I'm working with people, because I see the reaction. But then it's that thing of, don't have the ego. It always works. You've got to know that when it fails, know when it fails, because it does. I mean, I went through that with my program group last fall. They wanted some of the thought process, why, because there'd be sometimes I'd do an activity and I would just stop doing it, and we'd go skiing for a run, then I'd start doing something else. And they were kind of like, well, why'd you do that? And they wouldn't ask in the past. Well, last year they asked, and I'm like, well, it didn't work. and it's like, well, why didn't you tell us? It's like, well, you already knew it didn't work. You guys hated it. Well, yeah, we couldn't do that. I'm like, there you go. I mean, so it was, when somebody can't attain what you're trying to achieve, I mean, what did you set up? So if you don't recognize it and keep going along the path, or if you start something that they don't understand what you're trying to get them to achieve in that task, I mean, you don't have to give them the answer, if you're going through some guided discovery thing, but you need to recognize what's going on. So I would say if I prep for that without being in the group, it's really trying to evaluate and try to look at what I've already done and what I might not have done well with the group I had yesterday or last week. That, I said, 2 weeks ago, this worked great. And yesterday I did this and it didn't. I mean, what did I do different? Was it the group? Did I not read? Certain people in the group weren't ready for that. So yeah, I mean, I don't think the presentation, the setting up of the learning environment is a constant type thing where it's almost easier, I think, to sit down and prep for the tech, the technical pieces, which in turn, for me, makes it a lot easier to experiment with the teaching and to grow in my presentation and more than just the presentation, but how I set up the learning environment for people to go through the movements. Because if I'm wrapped in the tech, or, if that's not nailed, then I get screwed up in that, which we see with a lot of people that are coming to events and working through things, or are starting to train for their certification. They get so wrapped up into what they're teaching, the content, the actual movement pattern, that they don't realize anything of what's going on with the group that they're looking at. And then
they're probably not looking.
Yeah, they're not even looking. They're so focused on, I need to do this, and I need to do this, because they have that prepared thing. And it doesn't matter what happens with the group. Doesn't even matter if they need it. This is what I prepared.
Right.
And
Well,
this
and
works on the steeps.
when you watch somebody who's really, really good at coaching the way you're talking about, like, I got to ski with Jeb Boyd, the head coach of the national team, 2 years in a row at National Academy at Big Sky, and Jeb is a gifted teacher, and I was the first year I was getting ready for my ETS tryout, and so like one of my goals at National Academy was to pick Jeb's brain for the 6 days, which I was lucky to be able to do, and he told me on the chair, I'll never forget it. He's like, you have to coach yourself into obsolescence. Like your goal is to make yourself unnecessary. And I thought, wow, like what a great example of removing your ego from this. But with that, that there's a lot of responsibility on you then, because you have to actually not only provide people with what they need, but you have to make sure they get it in a way that when they leave, they can keep practicing it and know when it works and when it doesn't. Self-coaching is what makes the coach obsolete, So that was a big moment in my development, just trying to get my head wrapped around what he meant by that, but then watching him do it with a group of really, really great skiers for 6 days who all did something different. Within he had his thing that he wanted us to work on, which I remember the first year it was more skidding at the bottom of the turn, and the next year was more skidding at the top of the turn, but just the idea of playing with flatter bases and when it was appropriate and conditions and whatnot. But I mean, so there was an overall focus, like back to the stees and the trees and steeps thing. There was a title, right? Jeb had a goal, but he could look at everybody in the group and give a specific piece of feedback or a specific focus for them and work it. And it was terrific.
Yeah. Good stuff. Great stuff. So we're hoping folks will tune in again. Hopefully they enjoyed this podcast, and Angelo and I are hoping to have some more podcasts out in the near future.
You know what? If I were folks, I would tune back in.
I hope so. I
Just
hope they
to
do.
Hear what you have to say.
Well, you're here too, so they may say that they want me to just shut off and just have Angelo on here. We'll see what happens. Hopefully.
We'll see. We'll try a couple where we mute one of us or the other and see how that goes.
That would work good. But yeah, great talking to you today, Angelo, and I'm looking forward to us doing another one here soon.
Yeah, let's do it soon.
All righty, sounds good, buddy.